All right. Welcome back once again to the last session of this Q&A. My name is Choma Okonkwo, and this session is for USA, and we have our representative, Mr. Francis Adekoya, representing Into University Partners. Mr. Francis, you have about 10 minutes to just tell us about where we should study in the US and other opportunities in the regions, after which we go right into the Q&A session. Please, if you have questions, there is a chat box. Please drop your questions in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer after the presentation. Thank you very much. Mr.
Okay.
Francis, to you.
Yes. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great stuff. So my name is Francis, and I work with Into. We do have a number of US options for students who are thinking about the US. And from the logos of the universities that you can see on my left-hand side, these are universities that stretch from the West Coast to the East Coast, and we've also got universities down south. So regardless of the course you are interested in, chances are that we would be able to offer you a number of possible options that you can study at with any of our partners in the US. Now, wanting to study in the US is one thing. Qualifying to study in the US is another, and yet getting a visa is, a whole, headline of its own. So one, your interest in studying in the US, you need to be sure of the course you want to study, whether it's on the graduate level or postgraduate level. There are two ways in which students can come to study in the US. One is pathway, and the other is direct. Now, for students who are thinking about pathway, pathway is designed for international students like yourselves who would be migrating from one educational system to another. So students who come through the pathway will get a little bit of hands-holding. We will help to settle you into the new educational system that you find yourself. We will help you to build on your referencing skills, your research skills, your study skills, your academic writing skills, right? So these are some of the skills that you will build on as you run on the pathway stage of your course. Students who want to come onto direct can also come direct. These, in my opinion, will be students who are confident to hit the ground running, students who don't need the bit of hands holding that the pathway offers. But one thing that I must say, however, is regardless of how you come in to study in the US, whether it's through the pathway or through direct entry, you will still be studying for the same length of time. So the pathway does not increase your length of study. It's actually, so the way I like to describe it is, when you buy a bicycle for a little child, that little child has never ridden a bicycle before. The child wants to begin to enjoy riding the bicycle from day one, but you know that that child has not mastered the act of balancing on the bicycle. So those kind of bicycles come with two small wheels at the back called the training wheels. The training wheels will allow the student to begin to ride the bicycle from day one, and at the same time will also help them to gain stability and confidence and balance. And that is what the pathway does. So it doesn't extend your length of study, rather it adds quality to your studies, especially in the first semester that is quite critical. Then we talk about you qualifying to study in the US. So depending on the course you want to study at, for our direct entry, universities will generally require you to have a GPA of 3.0 over 4 scale. For And undergraduate students coming on to masters, that is quite easy to do. Basically, for most of the universities in Nigeria, we use a 5 scale. So what you need to do is to divide your final GPA by 5 and then multiply by 4. And that will give you a rough estimate of where your GPA sits against a 4 scale, which is used in the US. For students who are coming from WIAC, who are thinking about coming for undergraduate degree, the general way to consider a 3.0 GPA will be students who have more A's in their WIAC than B's. So more A's than B's. If a student has more C's than B's, then that student falls within the pathway gap. So one, I mentioned to you that the pathway does not extend your length of study. But if you're coming onto a pathway, you need to have a minimum of a 2.5 or a 2.75. But for a direct entry, you will need to have a minimum of 3.0 over 4 scales. So again, the pathway is able to, to accommodate students who have slightly lower grades compared to what the university actually wants. The last bit is the visa itself. So you could have the interest, you could qualify to get an offer, but when it comes to the visa stage, that is a whole total topic of its own. Now, I've been in the industry recruiting students to study overseas for well over 13 years now. Up until about 2-3 years ago, my expertise was just the UK. And when I joined the new organization I work for now, I had to learn quickly the visa structure for the US. And part of what I have come to understand is that one, when you're making an application for the US, and I assume this is the same thing for all other visa applications, one, you need to be very truthful. You need to be very straightforward. The general Niger slang, how they go know, it doesn't work here. Trust me, they will know. If you have ever applied for a visa before, whether that visa was turned down or granted, doesn't really matter in itself. Okay, you need to be honest to declare it when you're applying for a visa. To say, well, I applied for a visa to XYZ country 2-3 years ago, it was refused. This was the reason why it was refused, right? As long as the reason your visa was refused for the previous country has got nothing to do with fraud, you still stand a good chance of achieving your visa. So when students speak to me, for example, and I assume also when you speak to your counselors in Nubi, they will ask you, have you ever been refused visa for any country? If you say no, there's no way we would know. So we will say, oh, that's good. And then we'll feel no there. But you see, that visa officer does know, because the US, as with most Western countries, do keep a lot of records, and they also share intelligence. What is sharing intelligence? It's just sharing information. It's nothing more than that. So sharing intelligence is not something, that is out of the world. It's just countries collaborating with each other, sharing data. And if the embassy checks up with your name on their supercomputer, they would be able to draw a very good picture of your visa history. They will be able to know where you've been, when you were there, why you were there, and if there were any troubles whatsoever. So it is very important that you are truthful with your counselors when you are making that visa application. Generally, in my experience, I make sure I interview students before they begin to make their application. Because the honest truth is, there are some students who will just not get that US visa. As harsh as that sounds, that's the honest truth. If you've had visa history in the past that does not in any way put you in good light, I will advise you against starting the application for an admission in the first place. It is also important that when you attend a visa interview, so filling the visa form, which we call the DS-160 form, is one thing. Your performance at the visa interview is another. And you should be able to measure when you're speaking to the visa officer about why you've chosen to study at the university, why you've chosen to study the course that you want to study at, what your career goals are. And one of the frustrations that I have with a lot of Nigerian students is that we do not think very far. You need to think very far. So when you are asked, what's your career goal? You can't start looking around and doing, I want to come back and get a job at Total Fina Health. That's a wish. What's your goal? You must have put in some thought into what you are coming to do, how you are going to do it, and what benefit you're going to get from it. Sometimes they might ask you, what salary would you expect to earn upon return to Nigeria? Some people don't know. You've not researched how much people in that industry actually earn based on experience, based on qualification. These are some of the things that you need to think about. I once had a student I was preparing for visa, and I asked him, why have you decided to study a graduate degree in mechanical engineering? And he said to me, because I want to be a hot cake. If you want to be a hot cake, you can put yourself straight in the oven. You will be hot in no time. The visa officer has no time to listen to answers that are less than intelligent. The visa officer actually has 3 minutes, just 3 minutes, to make up his or her mind on whether or not you are genuine, or whether or not you know what you're doing, or whether or not you know what you're talking about. That visa officer might not be an engineer. He might not even know the first thing, the first law of engineering. But he wants to hear you wow him. He wants to see that passion in you when you speak. He wants to be convinced that you know exactly what you're talking about. He wants to be convinced that you've got a plan. And if he's not convinced about those things in 3 minutes, he is going to give you that form that tells you that you've not been granted visa. I hope, again, this is helpful just as an introduction. Hopefully, we would have questions along the way that I would be able to answer. Chioma, thanks.
We can.
Hi, Chioma.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Francis. This is very informative and very educating. We do have some questions for you. I'll just ask them, and then we will have you answer them. Okay, so the first one is someone said, do I need to write IELTS if I have a minimum of C6 in my WAEC for my English language?
So again, that comes down to whether a student is coming onto a pathway or direct. For most direct, for undergraduate students might be required to write the SAT or the ACT or the English language. In most cases, if a student has got the SAT, that also would suffice for English language, so you might not need to write it as long as you've got the SAT. For a graduate degree, if you're applying for direct, depending on the course that you are interested in, you might be required to have the IELTS or the GRE or GMAT. So again, it depends, largely on what you're coming to study. But if you're coming to study on a pathway, if you're coming through the pathway entry, then those are not required. No English language, no SAT, no GRE or GMAT.
Okay, can I add to that question? Francis has talked well about pathway and the university. But if you are going to the boarding school in the US, they have their own testing of English language, and they don't really require you to get SAT because they prepare you for that while you are in the boarding school. So you do not require that. SAT. So what we're doing today is just question and answers. So you have to, because we put this program together to help you with your study plans to the US. So it is not the fair. The fair is in April. The fair is starting in April, where you will get the universities and you get one-on-one with them. But this is to help your applications, whether it's getting admission or getting visas. So please ask all the questions that you need to ask about studying in the US, and we will be able to, as much as possible, answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. The next question will be, students who graduated just before the pandemic and lockdown cannot get a job. Is there anything that can be done to extend their time to stay and have an opportunity to work?
That, to be honest, I am not sure that I'm qualified to answer that question, to be fair. But again, this should be for students who are already in the US, and I want to believe none of you is in the US yet. But then again, that is a question that I can't give an informed answer to.
Okay.
Any question we cannot answer, we will take them to our partners and get them to and send you the answers later. So we take all the questions. The ones we can answer, we answer. The one we cannot answer, we take them to our partners and then give you the answer in 48 hours.
But
okay,
let me also, if I could, generally, for any student who is coming to study in the US, you would have, so there's something called the CPT. The CPT is a work placement that you can undertake while you are studying on a course. That is usually on a part-time basis. Sometimes it could be outside of the university campus. That CPT contributes towards your coursework. Okay, so again, that doesn't go on for a long time. Usually it could be for about a month, 2 months, 3 months at the most. There is one which is called the OPT, which students can take advantage of at the end of their program. And that would generally be for 1 year for everybody, right? Regardless of the course that you've come to study. Now, if you've come to study a course that is designated as STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, then you would get an additional 2 years on top of the 1 year. So that makes it 3 years for courses that are STEM and 1 year for courses that are non-STEM. Okay, so again, just to let you have an idea of the kind of allowance that you've got in terms of work. Otherwise, as a student in the US, you are allowed to work up to 20 hours a week. That work would have to be part-time, and that work must be on the campus of the university. Now, somebody might ask, how much vacancies could there be in a university? My answer is a lot. So basically, they could have a university gym. The university might employ 1 or 2 staff who are full-time. Every other staff right there will be students like yourself. The same thing at the university sport complex, the same thing in the library, the same thing even within your department, right? Sometimes the students man the reception, right? Part-time. So, and because students keep coming and going, those vacancies continue to get recycled. So there will always be vacancies for you to take up as a student part-time. Some other students, again, if they are coming on to a graduate degree, if you do want to, you can actually apply for, I've forgotten the name now. I need to find that name, remember. But basically, you would work as an assistant to the lecturer, whereby you are taking tutorials with junior students. But of course, for you to get that, you would have to be exceptional in your field. So it's not just something that is given on a platter of gold. Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question here says, what do I need to apply for masters in health law and for visa application as a lawyer in Nigeria?
So for the US, law is generally not regarded, or a student can study law as a post degree. The same thing goes for medicine and pharmacy. So basically, subjects or courses whereby you would need some kind of a license to practice in the US cannot be studied as a post degree. So if you have law degree already from Nigeria, the first thing that you need to do is you need to find directly a law school. So it is quite different. So law is not like a department, it's kind of like a school on its own. You have to find a law school, you need to write to them directly. They need to look at the strength of your first degree, your transcript, and then they will be able to advise on whether or not they are able to take you onto, a course in the law school as far as the US is concerned. That's a bit of a tricky one. And you also need to be mindful, as far as I know, Nigeria and the US do not practice the same law. So if a student is thinking about law, I would always give them a nudge towards the UK because the UK and Nigeria do practice the same law, which is canon law. So again, it depends on where you see yourself in the future. It depends on what you want to do in the future. And I know a little bit about the way law is licensed in the US is again very complicated. So you might be licensed to practice law in New York, for example, and you might not, with that same license, not be able to practice law in California. So you need to be very, again, these are some of the things that you need to research into. So sometimes you see lawyers taking multiple exams so that they are able to practice law in multiple states within one country itself.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you
much.
very much. Chama, let me come in here too. That's very good, Francis, because we have this problem in Nigeria where people want to go to US or Canada to study law, and we always advise that Canada and US, they are not the option for law because it's not a first degree to start with in Canada and US. And our law is fashioned after the British law. So your best route, if you want to study law, is UK. So we always advise people, law and medicine. Medicine is that it's not a first degree in the US. You might end up studying medicine in the US, but it's not a first degree. In Canada, they don't take international students at all for medicine. So Nigerians, we have to know this when we are thinking of the course we want to study. For law, I will advise UK for law. So he has given you the reasons, so I don't need to go right into the repeating what he has said.
Thank you very
Just
much,
to
ma'am.
also add to what Madam has said, even for medicine in the US, for a public school, that's a government-owned university, you stand no chance. But for private universities, you have a little bit of a chance. And of course, when the word private comes before a university, it usually means that it's very expensive.
Okay, thank you very much. Um, Someone asked here, after your studies, can you be allowed to stay and work in the US? And what do you need to do?
So I did answer this question, like a few minutes ago. You can work in the US. You are allowed to work in the US for 1 year for any course that, after any course that you've studied, whether undergraduate or postgraduate. If you come to study a course that is STEM, then you can work for 2 additional years, making it 3 years. I am not aware that there's anything special that you've got to do. It's something that is already there for you to take advantage of. So it's more of the paperwork, really. Um, One other thing that you also need to be mindful of is your I-20. Your I-20, which is kind of like the documentation that you need for visa. Once you apply for a visa and you get a visa, they would stamp, you know, like a duration of visa on it. It could be 3 months, it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years. But that visa actually stays valid as long as you remain a student. So even if you're stamped 2 years and you remain a student for 4 years, you are not illegal after 2 years, if you know what I mean. But if you travel out of the US and you want to return, then you would have to apply for a new visa. So it's something that students need to know. So mostly students that I've seen who have gone to the US tend to want to stay there at least until the end of their program before they start thinking about traveling out of the US to any other country or back home to Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much. Someone is asking here, what about a third class student here in Nigeria? Is there any opportunity for the pathway?
That's a very good question. So in the US is not bothered about your class of degree. What the US is bothered about is your GPA. And like I mentioned earlier, for a direct entry, you are required to have a minimum of a 3.0 GPA over 4 scale. For our pathway, you are expected to have a minimum of 2.5 to 2.75 GPA over 4 scale. Now, if you do the maths, a 2.5 GPA comes to roughly, a 2.5 GPA over 4 scale comes to roughly about 3.1 over 5 scale. So if you don't have a 3.1 GPA from a Nigerian university, chances are that, well, I can speak for my university specifically, we would not be able to accommodate you. So it is important that students, are able to put in all that they can to get good grades from their first degree. If you are a third class, again, I would generally want to nudge you towards the UK, because the UK does have that flexibility to absorb students with a third class, get them onto a top up or a pre-masters, and then get you onto a direct master's program. In the case of the US, your chances are really, really slim, if any.
Okay, thank you very much. Someone else is asking, for an undergraduate program, how long does it typically take to get an F1 visa?
It doesn't take any time at all. So basically, once you put in the DS 160 form, which is the visa form, and you pay what we call your service fee. So generally, when the universities issue your I-20, we will put your service number on the I-20. You then need to pay the service fee. As far as I know, you cannot pay that service fee from here in Nigeria. I think for most part of Africa, to be honest, I'm not sure about South Africa. So most people usually would have to get someone they know who is within the US or someone in the UK, Australia, or those, the Western countries who is able to make that payment for them. I understand it is now through Western Union. So your best bet will be getting someone who is within the US who can make that payment for you. Once that payment is done, then you get an appointment. Once you are able to secure an appointment and a time, then all you've got to do is to get yourself to your appointment and give a good performance in the interview with the visa officer. Like I said, the visa officer is a human being like you and I. They are affected by emotions. They could have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. They only have 3 minutes to interview you. We did have a meeting with staff of the US Embassy last year as a company. We met with them in Abuja and we met with them in Lagos. And what we were told is that in life or in law, you are actually innocent until proven guilty. But as far as a visa application is concerned, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. So that visa officer's job is not to help you. He's not going to ask you questions to prompt you to give a good answer. It is your job to give a good answer regardless of the question that you are asked. And you should be able to tie it to other things that even you have not been asked yet, things that show that you've been able to put some thought into it. You will know whether you've been given a visa or you've not been given a visa at that interview. You will be told immediately it is not a go come kind of situation. You will get the answer right there. The only reason why you might not get an answer on the day might be because they need additional documentation. So the visa officer is not refusing you visa, but he wants a particular documentation or he wants answers to something, maybe a document that you don't have in hand on the day. They'll give you a form, they'll tell you to drop off the document at a DHL office. Once you drop that document at the DHL office, within a couple of days thereabout, you will hear back from them on whether your visa has been granted or not. In such a situation, the visa officer will still hold on to your international passport just in case your documentation fulfills what is asking for, and then is able to issue you the visa. Or if that documentation doesn't measure up, then they would send a refusal letter and your international passport without the visa vignette stamped in it.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question here says, good day, I am a graduate and wish to go for my master's. What kind of visa will allow me travel with my kids and husband?
So it's still the same F1 visa. If you are coming with your dependents, we would require you to declare this information when you're making the application. And the reason is because when we issue you the I-20, we would also issue the same documentation to each of your dependents. They would need to have this on them when they attend the visa interview with you. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, please. Thank you. Another question here says, do you have postgraduate diplomas in accounting or business administration for HND graduates? If yes, what are the requirements to apply? And one equally travel with a despondent if visa is granted? And can one equally travel with a despondent if visa is granted?
Sorry, can one travel with who?
A despondent.
I
I am assuming the person means a dependent.
believe maybe a
Oh, yes.
dependent. I think
Yes,
that's
the
what the
person
person
made a
means.
mistake. A dependent,
Okay.
sorry.
Yes, I think so.
Yes. Okay. So again, I have answered the question of the dependent. Yes, you can travel with your dependent. But as far as HND is concerned, it's again, it's a slim chance as far as the US is concerned, or at least for my university. Now, that said, I have actually had one experience of a student who's got HND. He had a distinction in his HND or upper credit in his HND, and he had an extensive length of work experience. And one of my partner universities, which is the George Mason University, they are in Virginia. They were able to, give him a shot. But generally, if a student has HND, I would usually counsel them to consider the UK as a better option for HND.
Okay.
But excuse me, well, with the UK, considering it, the UK, they don't take HND for masters. And also, even when they want to take you in the UK, it depends on for postgraduate diploma, it depends on your grade, whether it's upper or lower, because some universities will say, okay, come and do first year, maybe in the they give you some credits or something like that. But HND really, for pre-masters, it has to be some few universities, because some of those universities for postgraduate diploma are looking for people with a good third class, or even some of them take 2-2 for postgraduate diploma. So it depends on the university in the UK. But that said, if you have HND, like Francis say, UK is the best option because in UK they have pre-masters, they have postgraduate diploma, they have top-up degree program. So they have made allowances for this. And Ireland is another option. You look at if you have HND in Ireland, it's like UK. They have uh, they accommodate that too because they have pre-masters and postgraduate diploma. But US and Canada, they don't understand HND. That's the truth.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Another question here says, good day, I am a graduate of BSc Biochemistry. Can I study MSc Nursing? And what are the requirements?
Okay, so the answer is no. Um, and that is me being upfront. Definitely not in the US. And even in the UK, if you were thinking about that, um, you would have to take a conversion examination to qualify, to know whether you can go back into the university for another 3 years in the UK to qualify for medicine. But again, sorry, to qualify as a doctor. It's not a straightforward process, but there is an examination that you can take if you're thinking about the UK. In the US, not so much. Again, partly because of the explanation we have given earlier about international students, and how difficult it is for international students to actually get the admission into medical schools in the first place.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the rest, some questions here are just asking about scholarships. So if you can just
Yeah, so I can answer scholarship. Um, the US is quite generous with scholarship, as opposed to the UK. Uh, but then again, if you do compare like for like in terms of fees, the US could also be slightly more expensive. For undergraduate, it might be a very good deal, but for postgraduate, again, for a master's degree in the US, it usually goes on for 2 years. There are some master's degree, very few, that might be a year. And regardless of whether your master's is scheduled to finish in 2 years or a year, largely it will depend on what you want to do really. So I'll give you an example. You could decide to, to take additional credits each semester so that you are able to finish your course earlier than planned. So you could finish your course in 18 months rather than 24 months. Now, does that save you money in terms of fees? The answer is no, because in the US, you are not paying per semester per se, you are paying per credit. So whether you run all those credits in 4 semesters or you run all those credits in 3 semesters, you will still have run all those credits. And because you are paying per credit, you will still be paying the exact same fees whether you finish in 18 months or you finish in 24 months. Scholarships will depend on what you're coming onto. Most scholarships for undergraduate degree would require students to have SAT, and you need to have a good score in SAT. Some universities only require the SAT just to have the scores in file. They are not particular about what you score on the SAT. Some other universities are particular about what you score on the SAT. And some, it's a bit of both. So I'm going to give you an example. One of our universities, which is Hofstra, it's in New York. It's a private university. It's quite pricey. Tuition fee is about $49,000. I had two students 2 years ago who wanted to go to Upstra. You know, they made the application. One of them had 1,260 on his SAT. The other had 1,000. I think he had 1,460, if I can remember correctly. And you know, the one that had the lower SAT wanted to study computer science. Sorry, one wanted to study a course in engineering, and the one with the higher SAT wanted to study computer science. And when the scholarships were given, the student with the lower SAT got the higher scholarship. He got £25,000 scholarship per year for 4 years. That's a lot of money. And the guy who had the higher SAT only got $18,000 per year. So I was confused and I decided to ask, what's going on? How come the guy who scored the lower SAT got higher money? And the reason for that was because the guy with the lower SAT had A's. I think he had only two B's in WIAC, all A's with two B's. And the guy with the higher SAT had B's and C's. So even though they accepted the SAT scores as, okay, that's a foot in the door, the actual thing that they used in determining how much scholarship they gave was the WIAC. So it's a bit of both. Again, depending on your personal circumstance, we'll be able to discuss that. For pathway, it is within my power, given the company's policy, to offer different amounts in scholarship for the pathway element. So if you are on a one semester pathway, I can only offer you a scholarship for that one semester. When you progress or when you finish that one semester pathway and you continue to the next semester where the pathway element is now no longer in play, it will now be left to the university to offer you any form of scholarship. And again, sometimes they do require SAT or GRE or GMAT. So even though we don't require it for admission, if you are keen on scholarship, you need to have that conversation with us at application stage so that we are able to advise you on whether you need any of those standardized tests or not. In some cases, it might just be some kind of essay that you need to write and submit, and then it will be vetted, and then they will decide whether or not you would be awarded this scholarship.
Very much, sir. Someone is asking, please, what universities do you represent in the US? And then secondly, as a US citizen and student residing in Nigeria, can one get a reduction in undergraduate fees in the US, and how soon can these apply?
So the US is, again, the US has to be different from every country. Even if you live in the United States, if you get an offer to study in a university so they've got this thing called in-state and out-state, right? So let's use Nigeria for example. If you live in Oyo State and you come to study in the University of Lagos, you will pay as an international student, even if you're an American. If you are a Lagosian living in Lagos, paying taxes in Lagos, your parents pay taxes in Lagos, and you get an offer to study in University of Lagos, then you will pay a reduced amount. So it doesn't matter whether you are a US national or not, as long as you do not reside in the state and you or your parents don't pay taxes in that state, you will still pay fees as an international student.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if there are more questions.
Yes,
Okay,
another question that Francis didn't ask. He asked, what universities do you represent?
Oh yes, I am so sorry about that. I should never have missed that. So you can see on my left-hand side, I decided to spend some time to actually build this. So these are the universities that I work for in the US. Again, you can do both pathway and direct. And then we've got some universities at the bottom where, just after the line. Sorry, the lower ones are not showing. I need to do a better job. Those universities are our affiliate partners. So those universities only offer direct application. So quite a lot of universities, like I mentioned at the beginning of the event, universities that stretch from the East Coast to the West Coast, and we've also got universities down south. And again, depending on your preference in terms of weather or family ties or things like that, we would have at least one university that you can consider.
Okay, thank you, sir. I don't know if there are more questions.
Anyway, we have had this session now to help you answer some of these questions. But we have the fair coming up in April, and that's where you will have various universities, and then you will have one-on-one with them. But I know that Francis has done a very good work joining the Nubi staff to give you this valuable information. I'm very sure that you have all she has answered all the questions that you posed. But my advice for you is this. I always say that to the students that we counsel. We have put up this event for you to be able to choose your study destination. In the morning, we have the UK people. They told you about UK and what it is to study in the UK. We had the Germany and Australia and Netherlands. We have Dubai and Malaysia. We have Canada before this US one, the Canadian people. They were able to tell you what it takes to study in their country. So by now, you should be able to know that is US the right place for me to go, or is it UK, or is it this? It is just to advise you. We don't encourage people who are timid really to go to US because you will fail the visa interview, because they want to see that confidence as you they really intimidate you. You really need to show that you have your study plans at the tip of your fingers. So if you are not that type of person that is confident and know what you are going to do in the US, we don't always advise it because they are seeing you. In the UK, at least they don't see you. They see your paper. In Canada, they don't see you. So if you are that kind of person that you don't have the confidence and you don't have your study plans at the tip of your finger, I don't think US visa is something going to be easy for you. But we try to give you interview. We try to give you mock interview before the time. So I hope we are able to answer your questions and that this session is productive for you. So we hope to see you when we have our fair in April. Unless you have something else to say, we have just 10 minutes to close this session.
Yes,
so
I just wanted to add to what you've said, ma. So I know for a lot of the students that I have seen, one of the other things that does give a bit of a minus when they attend a visa interview is the issue of funding. We are Nigerians. We know sometimes, one uncle somewhere will say, I will pay, go and apply, take my bank statement. But you need to be mindful that these white guys, their lifestyle is so different. They don't understand why one uncle wants to cough out $20,000 a year to pay towards your fees. So you need to be able, you need to convince them. So it's not just as cut and dry as, oh, my uncle is sponsoring me. It's also about why is your uncle sponsoring you? He might not ask you that question, but you should be able to anticipate that question. And even when they ask, oh, who is your sponsor? Don't just, oh, my sponsor is my uncle. They want to know why, they want to know what he does, they want to know how much he earns yearly. And one of the things that I say to students that I speak to is the way to gauge whether you are telling the truth or whether or not you've put some thought into it is that if your uncle happens to be working for an organization, then it is true that his salary per year is fixed. So you can confidently say my uncle earns an equivalent of XYZ $1,000 a year. If your uncle runs a business of his own, it is not possible that that uncle earns the same amount of money every year. So you cannot go there and say my uncle earns this amount of money every year. You need to think about it in terms of range. So I always say, in the last 5 years, my uncle has earned, or my uncle has earned between this and this. So they understand, and that, in my opinion, brings you out as telling the truth in some way. We were also told, even though they want to see a bank statement of 6 months, they would frown if they see a lump sum of money just dumped into the account, right? It is possible that you've just dumped money into the account, because I asked the question, what if I just sold a piece of land, or my parents just sold a piece of property just to get that money for me to go and study? And the answer I got was, the student should be able to demonstrate that. How do you demonstrate that? You have the documentation for the sales. So when he's asking you, who is your sponsor? Oh, my dad is my sponsor. Oh, and by the way, he just sold a piece of property so as to be able to put the funds in my account for my studies. And I've got the documentation for the sales here. Would you want to take a look? He wouldn't ask you for that documentation. He wouldn't ask you where that money has come from. But these are some of the things that, again, working with Nubi would help to prepare you towards the visa interview, so that you are not just answering the question the visa officer is asking, but you are also anticipating 2-3 questions that could come after that. And you are able to put that in one answer in such a way that you are not telling a story. I always tell students to observe the 30-second rule. Try to fit your answers into 30 seconds, but also don't spare vital details.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francis. Thank you. And these are the mistakes that many people make, and just for granted, they take it for granted. Okay, before you go, I just want to tell you that Nubi, in helping our students, we are in partnership with 2 banks, FCMB and Union Bank. And what do they do to help you? If your parents have a good income stream and they cannot pay your fees immediately, they can't pay it upfront, then you approach them in FCMB or Union Bank. They will give you that loan to pay the fees upfront, and their parents will be paying them instrumentally. But they must have source of good income. So this is what FCMB and Union Bank do for students, to help Nigerian students. And we're in partnership with them. So you could ask us how you go about it, and we will refer you to the officers that are involved. Or Chioma, any other thing?
Okay, no, I don't think there's any other thing. It's just a closing remark, and then we.
Oh, there's no closing remark. We've given the closing remark. We
Oh,
just thank everybody for taking time out to come and spend this 1 hour. And thank you so much, Francis. You have really, really added some value to this evening session that we have. And we hope to see all of you in April. The April one is a fair, and that fair is visual. We send you the link. You will have the opportunity to have one-on-one with the universities. So I wish you all the best and a very good weekend. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you very much, everyone. See you in our April Fair and bye.